Let me just introduce myself very briefly before I get into the first part of this series. My name is Lakeisha O'Kelly. I am an attorney, Attorney O'Kelly, and the areas in which I practice are in business. Of course, I help small to medium-sized business owners, entrepreneurs in different industries, providing products and services. I also am a sports attorney, entertainment attorney, and I'm in real estate. So in all of the areas in which I practice, whether it's in entrepreneurship, whether it's in sports, entertainment, or real estate, I focus on those contracts, I focus on intellectual property protection, and I focus on business formation and compliance. So that is what I do. I am going to give you this information. It's not going to be legal advice. What it's going to be is for educational purposes. I am educating you to take this information as a foundation to expand your knowledge, and then from there you can hire a professional. Hopefully from the information I give you, you're able to wean through those weeds to see who's just giving you information, who's just regurgitating information, and who are actual professionals in this field to give you information that is worth taking in. So I'm gonna give you that foundation, and hopefully you're able to use that to build up your discernment. What we do as professionals, such as myself, what attorneys we do, I want to show you something, is it is our job to stay abreast on things like this. These are the codes, the statutes, case law, to follow where things are going. Any great attorney, that is what we're doing. We just don't get in our field and we're practicing every day. We're practicing, seeing real life things, but we're also staying in the know when it comes to the law that pertains to anything that we're providing protection on. And so that is my job. That is the information that any information I give you, you will be receiving from someone who is staying abreast on the now and who also practices in this particular field. Okay, so I want to go ahead and let's just jump right in and get started. Let's start with giving like a brief history. Let's go over a brief history of the limited liability company, the LLC. It's really important to understand the history of anything that you are looking to be involved in, because just being in the present or trying to predict the future is not good enough. You have to understand where something came from to know how to maximize the present and to level up for the future. So let me just give you a quick overview on the limited liability company, and then we'll start dissecting and breaking down different areas throughout this series based on the parts. So let's just start with the origin of the limited liability company. So the creation of the LLC dates back to 1892 in Germany. So a German entity was formed in 1892 as a limited liability company. It wasn't until 1901 that it started to spread outside of Germany. So between 1901 and 1950, it spread throughout the Latin American and European countries. And then after the World War II, the US, we were engaged in international commerce. We were exposed to this business entity during that time, and we were attracted to this business entity during that time. Now, we were already operating and functioning businesses under corporation, because that was established in 1500, but the LLC offered some twists and turns to what we knew the corporation to offer, and I will get more into that later. But it wasn't until after World War II that the US was like, we're exposed to this, and we like what is going on. And so Wyoming was the first state in the US where it was lobbied to legislature to enact this type of business entity. It was lobbied to legislature, and then in 1977 in Wyoming, it was successful, and it was enacted. And then it wasn't until 1994 that it started spreading to all 50 states. So between 1977 and 1994, it started to move from Wyoming slowly to other places, but it wasn't until 1954 that all states enacted the LLC. And these dates are really important to know, and this is why I said history is important to know, because the information that I'm going to cover later on that a lot of us overlook, and we think it's okay to overlook it, is not okay because the entity is so young. If you notice, I said it wasn't until 1994 that all 50 states got it. That date alone, most of us probably who are watching this is older than a limited liability company on U.S. soil. Most of us are probably older. And if we go back to when it touched the first state in 1977, some of us are older than that. And if we're not, at least in 1994, some of us are very close to that. So the LLC is very young, which means the body of law is still being developed. It's still being, and this is why it's important for professionals as myself to stay abreast, to see how the courts are moving. Every time there is an issue, every time there is a claim, a lawsuit, the law is being developed. So you may have courts that look at previous law precedent, like if there was an issue that was similar to what's being brought before them, they may look at how the courts have held or the judges have held prior, or they may set precedent depending on what court it is in. So that's why it's important to know, because it's so young, you, the individual who's interested in forming an LLC, you, an individual who may already have an LLC, we can possibly be used as an example of continuing to form this body of law, and we don't want to be on the wrong side of that. So that's why it's important to understand, what has been developed as of today and how we can walk in that, that path to make sure that we're not engaging in something and then all of a sudden it's unexpected what we may have to bear because of what we thought we could or could not do. All right, so all 50 states had it in 1994. You have individuals who have established LLCs, been operating as an LLC. And then in 1997, the IRS came in and said, okay, there's individuals that are forming LLCs, not just like a corporation, like it's usually big companies, a lot of partners and people who've known to form a corporation, but you have individuals, small businesses, solo businesses, they're forming these LLCs. And the IRS said in 1997 that we're going to go ahead and make it official where those, for tax purposes, if you are a single member LLC, meaning you're the sole owner, we're going to allow you to file your profits and your losses on your personal income taxes. You don't have to file a separate, like a corporation. You will file a corporate tax, income tax, and then you will file whatever dividends paid to you, as an employee or owner of that corporation. Well, with the LLC, they decided in 1997 that it would not have to be a separate filing. It can be treated one and the same. Yet you still will get protections as a separate individual for the business. So that was really attractive. Now you have single members, and when I say single members, it could be a husband and wife. A husband and wife can be looked at as a single member LLC. A living trust can be a single member LLC, but the IRS said, okay, we're not going to charge this. We're not going to make you file a separate income tax. It can be all together. That was a huge benefit. And then several U.S. states looked at that and said, you know what, we like that. We are on board. So not just federally, which is the highest rule. The state said we're going to be aligned with federal, and we're going to allow single member LLCs to file what's called the flow through. You're flowing through the business to your personal income tax. However, what the states did And this is still prevalent in some states. This is why it's important to know the laws of your state that you have formed your LLC or where you're operating. States said, okay, we will do this on the tax side for single members, but for single members, we will not offer asset protection. So if it's a single member LLC, you don't get asset protection, but you can get these tax benefits. And there's different ways to go from, a single member LLC to having more than one to get the asset protection, but we're not going to talk about that now. That's just the history. So that brings you through to where we're at right now. Very young business entity, the youngest business entity, where body of law is still being formed. So this is why it's important to know what has been formed up to date and how those particular laws, what it looks like, how it can reflect how we should be moving for the present and the future. All right, so what I want to wrap up on this first part is just touching on the other type of ways to do business, just so we can have, compare and contrast. I won't go heavy into them because this is about the LLC, but just like history, it's also important to know the different entities, just so that you can have a balancing or some type of backdrop in which to reflect this information on. So I want to start with the sole proprietorship. This technically is not a state business entity. You don't register with the Secretary of State. So anytime I say business formation, what I am saying is that for your state, you will register that business with the Secretary of State to get your articles of organization, articles of incorporation, your certificate, whatever it is that you need to get to show that this is a formed business based on the requirements of, the laws of your state. Well, when I say the sole proprietorship, it's not. You don't register with the Secretary. You as an individual, if you have a vision, you have an idea, you create a product, you provide a service, you provide it, you sell your stuff, you are now a sole proprietor. You are in business. You have entered into commerce to provide this product or service. You didn't have to register with the Secretary of State. You are a sole proprietor. And as a sole proprietor, when you file taxes, as we talked about before, you'll be filing on your personal income tax. So whatever you make, so if you have a job outside of whatever products or services you may be offering as a business, if you have a job, you get W-2s from that job, you go file taxes, you file that, and whatever you're doing with your business, all of that is all together. It's one income tax. You're filing one income tax, your personal income tax is all together. But as far as protection, because when we talked about taxes and we also talked about protection when we talked about the history. When we talk about protection, as a individual is offering a product or service, you don't have protection. You are one and the same. You and your business, it's not separate, you're one and the same. So if you establish business assets, there also are personal assets on the table. All together is fair game if someone was to file suit against you. Your personal assets, business assets, they're all together. There is no protection, and that's what limited protection means. You're limited. Whatever happens, outside individuals, third-party people who have an issue with your business is limited on what they can, possess through a claim or a lawsuit. They're limited. Well, sole proprietorship is not limited. It's all fair game. So once you as an individual start providing a product or service, you start selling it, you are a sole proprietor. And unless you have some type of insurance, and you have to look into that, what the insurance cover and don't cover, what type of damages or claims, if it's intentional, wrongful negligence or whatever, insurance may not cover it. You have to look at that. But unless you have insurance, everything, personal and business, is fair game for someone who has an issue with your business. Now, if you take it a step further, you as an individual offering a product or service, if you decide, hey, I'm gonna bring in cousin Roy. I need you to come help me. I'm gonna bring in Auntie Tina. I need you to come help me. I have this vision. I have these products, services, whatever it is I'm offering to the world. But you're great with marketing and you're great with speaking with people, or you're great with help developing. Once you bring one or more individuals in, you now went from a sole proprietor to a general partnership. You created a partnership even if that was not your intention. Even if your intention was to bring people in to just help you run your business, get your business out there, you created by default a general partnership. Just like a sole proprietorship, you don't have to register with the Secretary of State for a general partnership. It is created once you bring one or more people on to what you're doing. So just like a sole proprietor is just created by offering products and services as an individual, a general partnership is created by offering products and services as an individual plus one or more people. And so just like a sole proprietorship also, you do not have limited liability. You and now other people's personal assets are fair game. They're on the table. If someone was to sue your business for whatever it was that you was doing, then everyone's personal assets and the business assets can be called into question. And what's worse than a sole proprietorship is that when it's a sole proprietorship, you can at least control you. You can control what you do, what you don't do. It's you. And if something happens, you know it's you. With a general partner, you can't control other people. You can give parameters. You can say, do this, say, don't do that. But whatever someone does or don't do, they do or don't do. And if whatever actions they put forth causes an issue, you're on the hook. Everyone's on the hook. In a general partnership, you're all responsible for the acts of each other. So in the legal world, we call that jointly and severally liable. So jointly together, you're liable jointly. Someone can come after you all together, or they can pick individuals. And that's what happened with a general partner. So to me, that's a little more tough than a sole proprietor because at least it's just you. But in both cases, you're looking at the same thing. You may, again, want to get insurances, but you want to make sure everybody got insurance to hopefully compensate or to be able to take care of or fulfill whatever claims so that it doesn't spill over to your personal assets. So that is the sole proprietorship and general partnership. And you can operate as a sole proprietor or a general partner and not have to operate under your name. You can have a business, come up with a business name. You can go to the Superior Court and you can register what they call doing business as. So it's a form that you would fill out in your state. You would put, who the business owners are, and then you will put the name in which you are doing the business as, and that's the name that you can actually present to the public, but it's still not a registered entity with the Secretary of State where you're forming that limited liability protection. All right, so let's step now into entities that are registered with the Secretary of State. So we talked about general partnership when you're together and you automatically form that. Well, limited partnership is the same thing except for some minor differences. So limited partnership means it's still a partnership. It has to be more than just you. It has to be you and another individual or entity. So that's where it's the same as a general partner. But where it's slightly different is when you're registering with the Secretary of State for the limited partnership, but two, you have a general partner and then you have a limited partner. So that's why it can't just be you, because you have to have a general partner and you have a limited partner. The general partner or partners are the individual that is running and managing the company. The limited partners don't have to be as active in the business. Some people, for example, use a limited partnership when they look at, investments, investors who may want to come in and don't necessarily want to be engaged or involved in the business, but they want to have partnership ownership. And then you have the general partner who is engaged in the business, or the entity. You can have an entity be the general partner, where the general partner is engaged heavily in the business. Well, with the limited partners, it is what it says. They're limited in liability. So if something was to happen, some claim was to be brought forth for that business, the limited partners will be limited in their liability. The general partners are liable. So that's where it's the same as the general partners, that's where it's the same as a general partnership. The general partners of a limited liability are liable for the debts, the liabilities, all that for the company. So that's why sometimes it's great to have a entity as a general partner instead of individuals, but there's different strategies on that. I won't get into that, but I just wanted to say the difference in the sameness of a general partnership and a limited partnership. Okay, so now we move into the corporation. Remember I said when I gave the brief history, we was exposed to this, LLC type of way of doing business and was attracted to it, but we already had corporations established. The corporate entity was established in the 1500s, so we already had that well before we was exposed to this after the LLC after World War II. The corporation has a lot of requirements that you have to meet by law. Again, read your state law, but a lot of them are pretty much general, right? So you need your board of directors. Now each state may tell you who can be a board of director, who can't. Some states say one person can be all seats. Some states may not allow that. You have the age factor. So there's different things you'll look at on what qualifies, you to establish whatever that requirement is in your state. However, there is a requirement. Bylaws are another thing that you need to establish for that. Having meetings and taking minutes in those meetings. So there's a lot of things listed that you have to, a lot of checks and balances that you have to, make sure you are covering in order to not just form an LLC, but to remain to form a corporation, but to remain in compliance running that corporation. You have your annual, registration. You just got to stay on top of all the things that you need to stay on top of. So that's why the LLC was attractive, because up front, at least, there weren't all these stringent requirements, all of these, dot the I's, cross the T's required. It wasn't, mandatory of having a board of director or, meetings with the minutes, the notes, all these different things. You were able to operate, especially if you was just a single member, a one person solo owner. You were able to operate as a sole proprietor, but you have the protections of a corporation. It was perfect. It looks great. Let's do this. But that's where it can actually get tricky. So I will stop there. I gave you the brief history of what the limited liability company is. I talked about the different type of entities that you will register with the Secretary of State in your particular state. And I also talked about ways that you can form your business and not have to register with the Secretary of State, but where you don't have that limited liability protection, and how you can expose your personal assets with your business assets as well. All right, so that is it for today. And, for part 2, we will cover, what actually the limited liability company is. Since I went through all of the different business entities, now we'll focus on in part 2 what the LLC is.